Hi, everybody. I am Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. 46 weeks a year, this guy is with us. We take the 6 weeks of training camp because I am all in the training camp bubble. But this guy is one of my very best friends. He is a very, very, very highly recognized journalist, as well as an extremely successful attorney in the Buckhead, Atlanta area of Georgia, and one of my all-time favorite guys, a dear friend, the great Jonathan Shop. John, I was going through shop withdrawals, and
Yeah.
when I talked about some issues the other day in the podcast, people are like, "We want Johnny Guitars to talk about this," and I'm like, "I know, I want Johnny Guitars too." But it's great to have you on. Did you enjoy your 6 week break?
It flew by. Very busy. Very busy. A lot of projects, a lot of moving, a lot of soreness from pushing things at an advanced age or advancing age, some guitar action, some golf. Yes. And now what it does is it kind of turns the burner up to simmer to get ready for the football season. You start seeing it, you start hearing it. You've got Hard Knocks, you got other stuff. And then we're just ready to celebrate the game. Labor Day weekend, of course, a feature weekend for college football, and all it does is tee up the humongous kickoff that we've got coming for the NFL season. Absolutely 100% ready to go.
All right. I want to dig into an issue that we've spent a lot of time on, but it's so Raider specific. I think it's going to be not just this episode. I think there's going to be more unraveling it. We've talked about Tom Brady wanting to be an owner of the Raiders, and that NFL people, according to NFL sources, had two issues with it. The first was that he would, as an announcer, he was going to be in other buildings. But the big one was they felt like Mark Davis was selling him the Raiders at a discount. And they felt it devalued the other franchises. Now, we've talked about it before, and I talked about it. I think, John, I don't remember because everything's running together, but I think it was Monday or Tuesday about the NFL allowing private equity to buy a 10% share in a team. Now, I think I have a very good friend who works in the venture capitalist private equity world, who gave me some great insight. I think he is talking to some of his other investors to see if they have a problem with him coming on our show to talk publicly. But he talked about blue sky, which, you being an attorney, you know what that is. It's selling hope. But he said the NFL is such a cash cow. Teams are going to be willing to jump in for blue sky. I mean, teams meaning venture capitalist teams, private equity teams. So a team like the Raiders, which was recently valued at 6.7 billion, he goes, I could totally see our firm jumping in at 8 billion, saying, yeah, we'll buy at a 10% valuation for 8 billion. No problem. Anyways, he's trying to talk with his group about coming on and giving us more detail. I know you're not a venture capitalist, but you are an attorney. Um, this to me, it's going to skyrocket the value of the NFL. But here are some things that he voiced his concern, and then I want you and I to go through them. Number one, no venture capitalist team is going to put money in not wanting some say. Now, doesn't mean that they have a right to veto, but they're going to want their voices heard. If you're putting $800 million into a company, okay, well, and he went on to say, in everything we do, we demand certain things like seats at the board of directors, etc. How would that work in the NFL? I'm not sure. I know we're ready for the NFL. I'm not so sure the NFL is ready for us. I love your thoughts. I think this is huge when you look at Tom Brady and Richard Seymour wanting to buy. Maybe they join a venture capitalist group. I'd love your thoughts.
Well, what we see is now this has gone over the goal line. So the NFL is permitting this, and it looks like they've already pre screened or pre qualified folks in firms that can come in. I think the reason that NFL teams would be doing this is maybe the most interesting, the one that the owners want to talk least about. I think the reason they want to do this most is to put money into opportunities that they don't have to share. So they've got to share TV revenue. They don't have to share some of the stadium revenue, some of the concession, some of the other stuff. So I think this is a fundraiser for NFL teams, and the owners who are going to take it, they're going to want to use it to try to create more income in areas that they don't have to share. That's the first outside thing that strikes me. The second thing is that, yes, this is a big push and pull of, do we have any say or not? Some of us remember when the Packers, about 15 years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, they released a few non-voting shares, which was a big deal. So you could buy a share of the Packers. Didn't really mean anything. You couldn't do anything with it. You couldn't go to the meetings or anything, but that obviously is really nearly unprecedented in sport. So is that what's going to happen here? Are private equity firms going to be willing to just jump in there, give their money just for the investment value and not have a say? I don't know. But there is a real obvious, you're going to hear words from investors of uncorrelated investments. Pro sports is uncorrelated to a lot of other investment opportunities, stocks, bonds, etc., that are out there. And that's why this is something that's appetizing. Also, like we've said here for a long time, and everybody watching this knows, this is the single most popular form of entertainment in this country. You would be foolish if you're an investor and you don't want to find a way to get into that. So what we're talking about here is freeing up cash for owners to pursue projects like renovations, like really just other models that they could generate income from. This is not going to be equal across the board. Obviously, there's some teams that we know, they're not going to have any need for any private equity. There's others that may be more wide open to it. It is interesting that the Raiders are somewhat in the middle of it, stirring the pot a bit when you've got Seymour and Brady looking for a way in. If you've got really, on its face, if you've got their dollars going into a bigger private equity pot that buys a piece of the Raiders that doesn't really have any operational say, that would really probably relieve the concern about Tom Brady as an owner being into places that he shouldn't be in. Take that thing and throw it right out the window if he has nothing to do with it at all. This is a new era here, a new era in the NFL. It's been done around pro sports around the globe before. It's probably going to be done for a while. I don't know how fast the impact will come, but when we see it, I think we'll be able to identify it when you see what this franchise did for their facilities and their organization and their business after the private equity dollars come in versus somebody else like maybe the Cowboys if they choose to stay out of it completely.
So I'm going to read to you a text from private equity. And again, would love to be able to get this guy on the show. I think we're going to. I don't know why his partners would have a problem with him being on, but I want to read this text. There is a rule that I've often heard discussed on your podcast, the rule of unintended consequences. Venture capitalists know exactly what we're getting into. This is our field. These owners are all billionaires who come from the business world, so they understand venture capitalism. I do, however, not think, I am not convinced Roger Goodell understands this. He works for billionaire owners who come from this world. He does not. I'm wondering about potential unintended consequences. I thought that was pretty deep.
Well, there have to be. There have to be. We don't know what they are yet. As far as the Goodell factor goes, this is not a commissioner that appears to be driving the owners. It's always appeared to be the other way around. And we talked about that earlier this offseason. So I don't even know if Goodell wants to know that much about it. Does he? He's riding an enormous train with an enormous salary. It's super high profile job. You really want to do something to screw that up and say, hey, owners, maybe some of this is not such a great idea? I doubt it. I don't think that's going to happen. Even if it was a horrible idea, I don't think so. There's some kind of a power situation in that room of NFL owners. And I think we can probably look at the ones that lead most often are likely behind this, whether they come out of New England, Dallas, uh, Las Vegas versus maybe some in other markets. Obviously, the situation in Green Bay is unique. The situations in Arizona and Miami are a little bit shaky. Carolina, absolutely huge private equity knowledge. Of course, David Tepper. Of course, that is the one weird thing that stands out about him versus all the other guys in there. He's probably got more personal knowledge of that than anybody. This is going to be something to watch. What do the fans want? They don't want it disrupting the sport. They don't want it disrupting the competition because everybody loves how competitive the NFL is, and they don't want it becoming too much of a business or cash grab. I'll give you an example. If games start showing up on Fubu and other stuff that a very small percentage of people have, the fans are going to say, hey, that's too far. How many things do I have to purchase to watch these games? That's one, maybe two steps too far. That's the stuff I would watch out for. As long as they stay out of that, I think this is going to be just fine.
All right, let's talk about this. Our buddy Kirk Cousins. Will he be traded from Hotlanta this year?
Personally, I hope so. Here's what this looks like. This looks like the Falcons went out and signed him, maybe broke a couple NFL rules before figuring out what they wanted to do. So they went out and got Kirk Cousins. Fantastic. It's his kind of second hometown. It's where his in-laws live. Fantastic fit. And then the people that run the organization said, we're going to throw the biggest curveball in the top 10 in decades and take a quarterback. And live on TV at the draft, our owner's going to stand there, the general manager, look like he's about ready to fire him. What's going on there? I don't know. Now, injuries are going to happen. Unfortunately, we all know it's part of the game. How fast does their phone ring in Atlanta if a starting quarterback anywhere gets hurt, especially a team that's either competitive or could be competitive? We know this is going to happen. It's just a question of who it happens to. But if it happens, how soon will that phone ring? Now, the Falcons, they have a mini bye in October, which is one of those Thursday games. You got a mini bye. Otherwise, their bye is not coming until much, much later in the year. So the idea that there's a natural transition point, first of all, it's insane when you sign the biggest contract for the biggest quarterback that you would already be thinking about, let's play the rookie. It's insane. And second of all, the schedule doesn't lend itself to that. What I'm watching for is if there's a quarterback hurt, how fast is the phone call made? If I'm Kirk Cousins, I can have a permanent home in Atlanta. I can live there in the offseason. I can do all that stuff. But I've got probably 3 great seasons left, maybe 5, somewhere in there, maybe 2, where I could really compete at my highest level and try to go get a Super Bowl after the rinky-dink things that went on in Minnesota. I want out. I just can't, we can't convey how backward it is to say we're going for a Super Bowl and then take any player that's not going to contribute on the field for multiple years after you sign the most expensive guy, the top guy available. Of course, Cousins would probably want out. Let's see how fast that happens. We've seen massive quarterback injuries. I remember Randall Cunningham, I think in week 1, for example. We've seen other major ones. As soon as one of those happens, that phone's going to start ringing in Atlanta.
And I remember telling you, I forwarded you a text from an NFL general manager on draft night. That's why the Falcons are the Falcons. All right. You and I have discussed this ad nauseum. Then Peter King came out recently and addressed it. I mean, grab the bull by the horns. And this is gambling in the NFL. Now, John, I'm going to share something with you that over the 6 weeks that we had not talked, a very dear friend of mine who is a very successful high school principal at a school with a very successful football program. We vacation, it wasn't really vacation. We went on a fishing trip this summer together. And we were talking about, I'll talk to him about what's going on in the sports world. He'll talk to me about NFL, whatever, just, 2 buddies, whatever. And he told me, he goes, I cannot believe the impact of sports gambling in high school sports. I'm like, what? He said to me, he goes, I bet you 50 to 60% of teenage boys are gambling now. What? I could not believe what he said. He goes, Hondo, guys that are 50 and older like us, we have no clue what the door to professional sports gambling and apps has now done. He goes, we're dealing with it all the time. He goes, not, I'm not talking about high school sports, but they're gambling on NFL, they're gambling on college. He goes, it is insane to me. So I obviously knew I wanted to talk to you about that. But then Peter King comes out. Talk about Peter's warning, and let's just dig into gambling again.
Yep.
I have no problem with gambling. I live, Vegas. But let's just talk about it. Your thoughts, and then I'll give mine.
The first thought is as we see this high school football flying around national television more often, as I saw it the other day in the neighborhood too, because pound for pound, the state of Georgia high school football is about as good as it gets. A lot of big programs, so you see them on ESPN, ESPN2, and thinking, I sure hope that doesn't get to the point where people start to somehow commit or establish gambling on high school games. The last thing we need. Now, what Peter King can say now is pretty much whatever Peter King wants. He's pretty much retired, which is great. You get a freedom. He's worried and a little bit of a warning of what does the NFL look like in 10 years? Well, he had some questions of, I don't like the 18 game schedule, suggesting some owners want to go to 20. We've talked about that before. 18 makes the most sense, but the rosters have got to be expanded and the calendar has to be expanded. Now, the gambling thing, King's warning here is looking far ahead. It's looking further ahead than somebody can at 20 years old, 30 years old, maybe even 40 years old. He says, I think this may be short-sighted. What about society in 10 years? Will Gamblers Anonymous, will they have like 10 times the number of addicts in 10 years because of sports gambling? Will there be kids addicted in high school who go to a college, flunk out because all they care about is the next bet? Maybe I'm an alarmist. I have no proof. I don't know what's going to happen. I can see it happening. Now, this is an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to forecast. I don't know what the future is relative to that because when you were in high school, when I was in high school, there was no cell phone, let alone no opportunity to gamble. My initial thought is the gambling apps, they need to do quite a bit. And I think they do a decent bit of self-regulation, but they probably need to over self-regulate to keep that at bay. There is always an opportunity and there's always a potential litigation of somebody that gets somehow snaked and they go down a drain. We've seen historic litigations in our country against cigarettes, for example, going way, way back. Could we see something like that with gambling down the road with some kid that gets addicted and runs off, unfortunately, at a younger age? Maybe. What I'd like to see is, and I don't know if it exists, they've got licenses, they've got a bunch of stuff that checks it out. But what some people probably need is like a cap on how much they can actually bet. And I know what people out there are thinking. I'm right there with you. It is all about personal responsibility. We all get that. But if you're a business and the business side of the gambling, you probably need to do some things to really protect from the biggest potential blow up problem. And one of those is not necessarily the 55-year-old guy that gambles all his money away. It's like you said, maybe the 15-year-old kid that it's like, how did this get access? How did this get going in the first place?
I'm going to say this to you because I'm a libertarian. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat, and this show is not political. But I'm sorry, when you start legislate, you can't legislate morality.
No.
And I think knowing some people in the gambling world, obviously Vegas, if a Joe Rogan wants to go in and do $1 million a hand, or not Joe, a Dana White, excuse me, and he's got the resources, that's his decision. It's his money. I just get awful nervous when you start telling people what they can't. It's just like telling an 18-year-old kid you can't go to the NBA. You
Well,
got to play in college or the.
we're not talking about 18. We're talking about way before then. I mean, we do. You can't drive.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying put all of the restrictions in. No, if
Just
listen,
very young. Yeah, I'm talking
I
about.
would just like to see them say, like with drinking, there's no gambling if you're under 18. Under 18, God bless you. If you're old
Well,
enough to die for your country, you're old enough to gamble.
yeah, and I think that's pretty much the way it's set up. But the concern is anybody seeping through? Is anybody finding a way to gamble at a super young age? Did they get their brother's license and put it in and look close enough? All that kind of stuff. I don't. I understand Peter King's concern. It's a valid concern. I'm not sure it's going to pan out to be any worse than the situation is. I'm not sure the young folks are that into this. I hope that they're not. At the same time, every couple of years, there's a whole new set of young folks coming in. The young folks now who are between 15 and 22 have experienced things in the last number of years of life that the next set they will have been too young to experience. So this is
Let me give you an example of this, okay? So Shannon and I in our vehicles have screens that come down with TVs. And the other day we get in the car and Dexter instantly wants the TV turned on. Now he's 2. And I literally said to Shannon, when he can't get in the car without instantly calling for the TV, we're going to nix this right now. We're just going to put that ain't happening. You're going to learn how to look out the window and enjoy scenery and talk to your family. But you're right. You never know. And I think the other thing that King was trying to get into the discussion is what we've talked about. You can't keep embracing the dollars of gambling and then not expect it at some point to impact your sport. You know, I'll never forget this as long as I live. When my son Hondo Jr. was young, they went on a field trip to a reptile museum. And one of the kids asked one of the I don't know what you call them. We'd call them zookeepers at a zoo, but whoever, the reptileologist, obviously I'm making that up, and said, you know, have you uh, ever been bit? And he says, I work with snakes every day. I have been bit. If you're going to take the money from gambling, you're going to get bit at some point.
Yep, it's a danger. We've talked about it. We've practically predicted it. We followed it last year when it started hitting the NFL. We've seen it hit NBA, obviously, really hard. We got a lot of eyes on, and a lot of this stuff has gotten better with tracking and all that kind of stuff. Let's see now at the player level and the players' families. Let's see if they maybe got the message and they behave better this year, or all of a sudden we've got a big blow up story, you know, in week 3 because somebody was gambling or their phone was used to place a bet inside of an NFL facility.
Totally agree. All right, let's turn now to Jerry Jones gone wild. If you've ever been around Jerry, what he said does not surprise you. How he said it does not surprise you. But let me go back to this. So to me, Pat McAfee's become must view. If you're a sports fan, and I love YouTube because I don't have to watch it on ESPN. I can just wait, go right to YouTube during the day or whatever at night. So McAfee's reading this statement, and I laughed. I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds like Jerry. Pat is totally getting them. And then Pat goes, I'm not making this up. It's not a faux or a parody. Total, total Jerry Jones, total way he would say it. I thought it was hilarious, but it's not a good look for the NFL. But your thoughts on the Jerry Jones gone wild?
It's a little bit like Peter King in a way. Jerry Jones has gotten to an age where he doesn't care anymore. So everything that he said, maybe on his own, or we've seen peaks of in Hard Knocks, he just went ahead and said it. It's basically this. I am the general manager. I own the team. Nobody can do the job the way that I would do it. They would have all had to go to me for approval. And by the way, people, and this is probably the point he should have made more than any, I have 30 years of experience doing this now. So don't tell me I don't have any experience doing it anymore. I literally did it on the job. Now, objectively.
No, wait. That's not what he said because it was mixed with some bombs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, he talked the way he normally talks, and I don't have a problem with the way I enjoy it.
No. Please hear me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I had a problem with it, But sometimes when you work in this world, as you know, because you're a journalist and a attorney, sometimes the public persona of a player or a coach or an owner is not private.
No, and yeah, and on the very bad end, I remember Kirby Puckett kind of being exposed, and that's a whole different era of media and everything. Puckett had a certain aura, and it turned out to not be necessarily true. This is now where people are more accepting of really straight way adults talk. And I think Jones did this on purpose. He said, I think, you know what, I'm old enough. I've had enough of this. I'm just going to lay it out like I would in the language I would. You can go ahead and print it this time, Calvin Hill, because I'm the guy. I own the team. I've done what I want. I'm the GM. Nobody else can probably do it the way I would do it. Now, objectively, I'm not sure how many times a general manager traditional would have done that much better than Jones. I'm not defending him. His record is what it is, but they haven't been all bad moves and bad picks. Not all of them. They haven't all been really big whiffs. I don't know if you look at the talent and everything that the Cowboys have had, whether the general manager has really failed as far as them not getting to another Super Bowl in recent times, or if it's been a combination of coaching and players, etc. I really don't know. I don't think Jones' general manager record is as bad as people have probably tagged it to be. And I do think he's got a pretty good point. I know he didn't lay it out as clearly as I'm sure he probably meant to, or as I read it to be, which is you can no longer say I'm anywhere near an inexperienced general manager. I've got a long track record of doing it. But the bottom line is I'm the guy. I got so much more time left. I got no cares to give. I'm going to be the guy until I figure out that I can't do it. And he says I'm a long way away from that. Whether that's true, who knows? But this was hilarious, fun, and a timeless piece. We will be talking about this piece for decades to come.
Great. Now let's talk about a bad stadium, bad location. Hey, let's just spend more money. Sounds like a government project.
Sounds like the 49ers. Is the 49ers stadium really good? Doesn't look good. It's not in a good location. So, private equity or not, they realize that they got to ramp it up. They're in the valley, if you will, the Silicon Valley area. So they're going to spend a lot of money on 4K boards, Wi-Fi, etc. I'm not sure this is going to do that much. This is really a weird, and it's become kind of a niche stadium. Candlestick Park was wild, infamous, but also relatively accessible to the somewhat average fan in San Francisco or the Bay Area. Levi Stadium is not. I don't think these improvements or changes are going to help. I think they are kind of looking at a luxury box driven stadium. Doesn't do much for atmosphere. I think that the lesson here is you really got to build a good stadium the first time. Jerry Jones probably did pretty well with Jerry's Dome. In Atlanta, they did a good job, except the roof, which is really an enormous hamper on what would have otherwise been a really good stadium. It's a better stadium than, forget the roof, it's not so bad. The Raiders Stadium is maybe nearly the gold standard. I don't think the 49ers Stadium is close. I think it was a little bit of a foul tip, and I don't think this improvement is going to help. But if you want to know what's coming with the private equity stuff relative to Browns, Bills, etc., this is a preview. They're jacking up the juice for the higher end stuff. Again, why? Because they don't have to share that money.
Mm-hmm. I was talking to an owner, but a family member of an owner. So, I mean, they'll one day be the principal owner, but at the owner's meeting, we were talking about stadiums. And he talked about how you're going to continue to see seating capacity shrink because then you can have more luxury boxes and luxury seatings, that and all that's more. But he told me, he said, I believe, and he goes, with any new stadium moving forward now, not a renovation, you're going to have chargers at every seat for people's cell phones, high speed internet. He told me that the newest feature is literally going to be making these the most internet and LED. He just said they're going to turn into, and he used the sphere. He said, I could see a dome becoming like the sphere, where up on the roof you can see the blue sky and it can go and show highlight. I mean, I walked away from that thinking, wow. I mean, I'm looking forward to where stadiums are going.
Yeah, and in a way, another really successful built stadium, the Rams Stadium. Pretty good job. Pretty good job.
Yep, so
Cool.
fine.
The angle, the sea air coming in, all that stuff good. So maybe do a good job the first time. But that message is one that is important to get. Why? We're at home. We have a phone. We have a tablet. A lot of us have multiple screens with multiple games going on at once. We are consumers of entertainment. Some of us even playing guitar while we're watching the game. And maybe you can't bring a guitar to the football field, but if you want to get people to get out of their house and spend the money and sit in the seat to enjoy the atmosphere of the game, the more entertainment options you can provide them, probably the more comfortable and enjoyable time it will be. It's hard to imagine, folks, but there was a time when Dan Snyder owned an NFL football team. 1. 2, he would not permit out of town scores to be shown inside of the stadium. There were no out of town scoreboards inside Raleigh, John, Maryland, inside FedEx Field. That's the complete opposite of the approach you're talking about here, which actually has a clue, as opposed to Mr. Snyder, who really did not have many good clues. Got lucky once.
All right. We conclude with this. Every week, John and I during the season do a featured foursome where John randomly picks 4 games and we pick against each other the ones we disagree with. John keeps score and we see who's winning at the end of the year. So, John.
Yes.
Here we go, brother.
Here we
got
go.
4 games. You picked them. Let's go.
Yes, and we're going to keep, obviously, the Raiders and Chargers is a featured game of the week because it's a rivalry. We're going to keep that one out of there. We are talking about what seems to be obvious, Baltimore at Kansas City. Yes, it is obvious. What's not obvious is a little disruption in the Chiefs, little offseason, some pats on the back. This one means a little more to Baltimore. Baltimore is going to win by 3.
I have said, and I'll say it again, Kansas City will not win the Super Bowl this year. There's too much. I've went into ad nauseum why. When the Raiders get ready to play them, I'll revisit it. But I'm going to still pick Kansas City to win this one at home. But I would not be shocked with a Baltimore upset. This is a very good Baltimore team that I would not be shocked to see them in a Super Bowl. I'm not picking them to make it, but I wouldn't be shocked. I'm going to go Kansas City at home. But a Baltimore, but I mean close. I could see Kansas City winning on a last-second field goal.
With that, I will take Baltimore and Philly in our Super Bowl to come. Now, game 2. What in the world are we doing? In Brazil, Green Bay, Philadelphia. Nice flight down. Here's what I wonder. I think Philadelphia feels a little bit disrespected. Why are they getting dragged to South America to play this game? I think the Eagles are a little salty. I think they don't want to be there. I'm curious about who has a hiccup in transportation, pregame meal on the field, whatever it is. I don't think the Eagles want to be there. I'm going to go against my best instincts, and I'm taking Green Bay.
All right, I'm going to take Philly. And I want to go first with the next one.
All right.
The Matthew Stafford Bowl.
Terrific game.
Back in Detroit, I am taking the Lions. And you know I love Matt. I love Kelly. I love the Staffords. I know them. This pains me. I'm from Michigan, but because I'm not a fan of either team. I grew up a Lions fan, but I'm not a Lions fan now. But I am a Matt Stafford guy. This hurts me, but I'm sorry. The Lions punch him in the face. And, this one hurts me. It hurts me because of Matt. It doesn't hurt me for any other reason.
Well, the Rams have a brand new era. We know that. I mean, you cannot take Donald off the field and not have it be a new era. I think the Rams really were playing well at the end of last year. I think that is in the past. This one means more to the Lions. The Rams are a longer-term ascent. Lions, big for the NFL. So more than 7, I think the Lions take it. Lastly, it's not a sleeper. It should not be a sleeper. Can we see some offense? Jacksonville, Miami, Florida battle. Could be some high scoring. A lot of people are sleeping on the Jags. Should not be done. Now let's talk about Miami and mention one thing so it's in ink on this show so we remember it in December. The Dolphins have got to get home field for any playoff games. They need to know, understand, and live that from game one. Each game this year, to me, the Dolphins need to have an elevated level of importance because they have got to get home field as many games as they can, or they are not going to go very far in said playoffs. Jacksonville at Miami, tough stuff for Miami. They start with a loss. Trevor Lawrence, Jaguars.
Dolphins, they're going to win this one. Listen, I love Trevor. I think Jacksonville's underrated. I love Doug Peterson, the coach. But Miami at home, man, that is just a whole. And a lot of people don't understand because they think same state. Jacksonville and Miami are different. I mean, regions. One's tropical. Uh, that is a very difficult place to play. Even though Jacksonville is warm, the humidity, the heat, all of it. I'm riding Miami all the way. So next week we're going to get into before the Raiders game. We're going to literally get into where the Raiders will be by the bye week and everything else. We'll get into all of that next week because I haven't made my final analysis yet, but we'll get into all that next week. Okay, Johnny?
Awesome.
That's our guy each and every week, the great Johnny Guitars. Johnny, tell them where to find you on X.
At JP Spartan.
Awesome. See you there, buddy. Go green.